All right, we're going to look now at the second question, and it regards the Vatican Bank. And I ask him, should the Vatican Bank be abolished? Archbishop Vigano responds, the Institute of Works of Religion, the IOR. IOR is the abbreviation for the title in both Latin and Italian. It's the official name of the Vatican Bank. It's not called the Vatican Bank. It's called the IOR, or the Institute of Works of Religion. Is a bank, says Vigano, and it is normal that an institution such as the Catholic Church and the Vatican City State are equipped with one. Its management is entrusted to two lay people, the president and a general director, while a commission of cardinals is responsible for supervising its activities. Since it is not administered by the government of Vatican City, in my function of general secretary, I never had any institutional role in the operation of the bank. It is up to those who administer the IOR, i.e. the Commission of Cardinals and ultimately the Secretariat of State, on behalf of the Holy Father to dictate the rules that guarantee its correct management and the transparency of its operations, and also to prevent speculation and illicit activities. Now that leads us to this very important next question. It's the third question. And this is where I ask Archbishop Vigano to detail exactly what was going on in the governorate of the Vatican City with the Vatican Bank. And here he gives dates, names. And I think for the sake of history, this portion of the interview is very important. I think this will go down in the history books. There is a lot of detail here. It is very long, but I think it's worth our study and worth our analysis. So again, I ask him, in my book, Infiltration, I document your investigative work as Secretary General of the Governorate of Vatican City State from July 2009 to September 2011 under Pope Benedict XVI. What else did you find? For the sake of history, can you tell us exactly what happened? And here is Archbishop Vigano's answer. Before being appointed to the governorate, I've been appointed by John Paul II as the delegate for the pontifical representations in the first section of the Secretariat of the State. My immediate superiors were the substitute and the Secretary of State, who were the only ones with direct access to the Holy Father. Listen to the details here, folks. My task was to prepare all the dossiers relating to the hiring and promotion of the staff of the Roman Curia and the apostolic nunciatures, and also to manage highly confidential dossiers concerning members of the Roman dicastery and the College of Cardinals. All right, so Vigano is managing highly confidential dossiers on members of the dicasteries and the College of Cardinals. My investigative activity, says Archbishop Vigano, preparing the dossiers and formulating an assessment on the persons and the suggestion of the decisions to be taken, ended with the delivery of the dossiers to the substitute. It was then up to the substitute and the Secretary of State, first Sodano and then Bertoni, these are cardinals, to present my dossiers to the Pope or not, deciding based on their own total discretion whether to advance someone or shelve them. For example, in addition to the well-known case of McCarrick, what did my superiors do when I gathered very serious information about Cardinal Maradiaga? Why was he elevated to the rank of cardinal instead of being punished in accordance with the crimes he committed? So we see here there's sort of a circuit breaker between Archbishop Vigano and the Pope, and it has to go through the Secretary of State. So Archbishop Vigano could assemble these dossiers, in this case against Cardinal Maradiaga, and present them to the Pope. But if the Secretary of State or the substitute got involved, they could be shelved and they could never get all the way to the top. Does that make sense? Archbishop Vigano goes on to explain some of these problems in the Vatican flow. He says, Cardinal Bertoni, who kept Pope Benedict under control, obtained his permission to remove me from my position because, as I said in my June 2024 statement, j'accuse, I was obstructing his action and his appointments. He had me sent to the governorate as general secretary, but since it was a diminutio, that is a demotion compared to the previous role, Bertoni promised me at the end of Laggiolo's term, who was now close to retirement, I would be appointed president of the governorate, a cardinal's position. On the very first day of beginning my role at the governorate, 16th of July, 2009, I realized the total irregularity and corruption of the administration. I immediately discovered the existence of a finance and management commission, an illegal entity that was not foreseen by the statutes of the governorate, composed of a group of eminent Italian bankers who were in charge of the financial management of the Vatican city-state. This commission, presented as merely a consultative body, in reality had decision-making functions and speculated for their own profit on Vatican investments placed in investment funds, including BlackRock. It seems that BlackRock has their finger in every pie, including this pie, according to Archbishop Vigano. So continuing along, he says, including BlackRock, with which they had signed management contracts whose costs were higher than the interest paid to the Vatican governorate. Vigano says, I therefore immediately set to work, and within a few months, the deficit of over $10 million that existed in the 2009 fiscal year changed to a surplus of $44 million, putting an end to the illicit affairs of both prelates and lay people. This recovery operation should obviously have entailed the removal of the protagonists of such malfeasance, starting with Cardinal President Logiolo and the administrative director of the Vatican Museums, Monsignor Paolo Niccolini. Logiolo, who reeks of Freemasonry, is roped together with Cardinal Silvestrini, who is in turn a creature of the Secretary of State Agostino Casaroli, the man of Ostopolitik, a key figure of the pontificate of John Paul II. Here we see Archbishop Vigano connecting the Italian bankers with Freemasonry. If you've done any research or any reading on the history of the mafia, the mob in Italy, and the role of banking and the connection with Italian Freemasonry, it's thick. It's thick. Some of that is covered in my book, Infiltration. If you want to read that, you can get it at a Catholic bookstore, Amazon, or I'll send you a signed copy if you go to patreon.com/Dr. Taylor Marshall. Silvestrini, head of the second section of relations with the states, was a prominent member of the St. Gallen Mafia. If you want to know what the St. Gallen Mafia is, read my book, Infiltration. I give you the names, I give you the dates. He was a member of the St. Gallen Mafia and head of the Villa Nazareth University College, a sort of ecclesiastical version of the Young Global Leaders for Tomorrow program of Davos. Here you see deep church, deep state working together. Former Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte, a dark figure who condemned Italians to house arrest during the pandemic farce, emerged from this breeding ground at the crossroads between deep church and deep state. Monsignor Paolo Niccolini belongs to the so-called Lavender Mafia, the Vatican homosexual lobby. As administrative director of the Vatican Museums and Cultural Heritage of the governorate, he found himself managing the main source of revenue for the Vatican city-state. Among Niccolini's main misdeeds that I immediately had to deal with, there was a contract he prepared with the approval of Cardinal Logiolo and my predecessor, Monsignor Renato Boccardo, for the restoration of Bernini's colonnade and the two fountains of St. Peter's for the value of 15 million euros. The governorate was not actually included among the parties to the said contract, which had instead been stipulated in a Swiss bank between the company responsible for raising funds to finance the works through an advertising display on the colonnade of St. Peter's Square and the company in charge of the restoration work, chosen by Niccolini without any tender. Monsignor Niccolini was owed a significant monthly fee paid to him directly by the firm that raised the funds through advertising. This firm retained for itself some millions of euros already collected, which should have been paid to the company that was carrying out the restorations according to the progress of the work, to the point of causing its interruption. I was therefore forced to intervene, to have the contract dissolved and demand that the sums collected be immediately paid to the governorate, and thus provide the remuneration of the works carried out. It was then that I was kicked out of the governorate, and Cardinal Vigano once again found himself in a position to act undisturbed. So here's just one example of some graft, some kickbacks, some manipulation of contracts, and the flow of money for the restoration of, what was it, Bernini's colonnade? Yeah, in the two fountains. If you've ever been to St. Peter's, the Vatican in Rome, there's those two fountains out in the piazza. I assume that's what he's talking about there. So this is just an example here of one case that's worth $15 million with corruption. And Archbishop Vigano comes on the scene. He blows the whistle and he's out. He's kicked out. Archbishop Vigano gives us another case. He says another case of mismanagement was the assignment of the contract for setting up sales points at the Vatican museums to the Opera Laboratori Fiorentini, which represented a turnover of millions of euros and which allowed Niccolini to gain an enormous personal economic advantage under the table. Vigano says, my removal from the governorate occurred after defamatory press campaign organized by Monsignor Niccolini and the young, powerful Marco Simeon, a well-known homosexual Freemason, former secretary of the Minister for Urban Cultural Heritage and secretary of the president of Mediobanca, an intimate friend of the Secretary of State Bertoni and his protege, to whom he later owed his promotion to the Italian state television, RAI, where he was in charge of relations with the Vatican. My work was nullified, said Vigano, and dissolved the team of collaborators I had set up, confirming in their places all the corruption protagonists I had reported. Monsignor Niccolini was promoted to head of the pontifical villas in Castle Gandolfo, where he would manage an enormous property much larger than the Vatican city-state. He obtained from Bergoglio the immediate expulsion with brutal and vindictive methods of Eugenio Hosler, a man of integrity and my close collaborator, son of the major of the Swiss Guard, who saw his reputation, his personal career, his good name, and indeed his very existence destroyed. Recently, Monsignor Niccolini was appointed by Bergoglio as director of the Laudato Si Higher Education Center, which deals with green projects in accordance with the diktats of the World Economic Forum of Davos. The latest of them, advertised a few weeks ago, consisted of an agrivoltaic plant in the extraterritorial Vatican property of Santa Maria di Galleria. The project had already been proposed by Cardinal Vigano under Benedict XVI, and I was one who prevented its realization. So here you kind of see, it's not just the banks and it's not just the flow of money. It's also these projects that are associated with, according to Vigano, papal documents, right? So they need this done. It's been blocked before. And to sort of pave the way for these green projects, there is the Laudato Si. And so he takes Niccolini, who's this corrupt guy, according to Vigano, and Bergoglio appoints him the director of this Laudato Si center. And then they begin their project. So again, it's sort of this hand-in-glove, deep state, deep church, according to Archbishop Vigano. Following these media attacks, Pope Benedict XVI set up a commission of inquiry made up of three cardinals, Herranz, Burke, and Lajolo, despite the latter being directly implicated. And I think, just as an aside here, this shows just Pope Benedict being naive. And I think, in retrospect, we see that. Bertoni managed to persuade Herranz to dissolve the commission, which he then replaced with a disciplinary commission of the governorate, which, despite being under the control of Bertoni himself, decided to dismiss Niccolini and adopted sanctioning measures against the management of the pontifical villas. The measures adopted by this disciplinary commission were, however, nullified by Bertoni and Lajolo. So again, someone gets in trouble, someone above covers for them and clears for them. While Pope Benedict had twice expressed to me his desire to appoint me as president of the Prefecture of Economic Affairs of the Holy See in place of Cardinal Velasio de Paolis, a position he told me in which I could best serve the Holy See, Bertone obtained my being sent to Washington, D.C., away from the Roman Curia and those I had disturbed in my fight against corruption. So here is where the story of Archbishop Vigano becomes even more interesting. He's uncovered these scandals in the Vatican. They need to get him out. Bertone wants him out. So they give him, it's not really a promotion, but they say, okay, you're going to be the ambassador to the United States of America, apostolic nuncio. That way you're out of all of these economic details. We can kind of run free, do what we want to do side deals, do kickbacks, and we're going to send you over to D.C., and you won't be with us anymore. And of course, Archbishop Vigano is now going to expose the greatest controversy in American Catholic history, and that is the sexual perversion and molestation of the leading cardinal in America, the Cardinal of Washington, D.C., McCarrick. But in the meantime, there was the controversy of the butler, the Pope's butler, who was leaking correspondence to the press. Let's take a look at that. Archbishop Vigano. He says, the butler, Paolo Gabrielli, and I've done podcasts on this. You can go back on the Dr. Taylor Marshall podcast and watch whole podcasts of me documenting exactly what happened here. He says he's an honest and naive but well-intentioned man, on his own initiative, handed over to the press my letters, Vigano's letters, addressed to Pope Benedict and Bertone, in which I denounced the vast corruption in the governorate. With this gesture, Gabrielli hoped to be able to help Benedict by bringing to light the network of complicity in the Vatican, the role of excessive power of Bertone and Lajolo, and the machinations against the Pope. The role of Monsignor Genswein was also decisive. He competed with Bertone for control over Benedict in the government of the Church. In 2012, after the leak of these documents, Vatilinks I, the Pope established a new commission of cardinals composed of Herranz, Tomko, and De Giorgi. Despite the fact that I was at the center of those events, this new body tried to ignore me for at least 2 months, and it was only following my explicit telephone request to Cardinal Herranz while I was in Washington that I was listened to so that I could give my testimony. Your Eminence, don't you think I also have something to say in this matter? The Cardinal's upset response was, if you really want to. My written memorandum, says Vigano, in addition to the report of the interrogation, was inserted in the famous white box that the Emeritus delivered to Bergoglio in April 2013 when he went to visit him in Casal Gandolfo, instructing his successor, Bergoglio Francis, to intervene and remedy the rampant corruption in the Vatican. And here is the picture of the white box documented. All right, this contains important documents, and it contains Vigano's memorandum right there. Gets interesting because here is where Vigano meets with Bergoglio on the 23rd of June, 2013. So Bergoglio is in the Vatican, right? He's been elected. He's Pope Francis. Vigano meets with him. He says, on the 23rd June 2013, when I met Bergoglio, after he asked me about McCarrick and the Jesuits in the United States in order to feel out my position, he asked me to give him the dossier that I had given to the 3 cardinals appointed by Benedict to investigate. I did so immediately, and he told me, I have a small safe in my bedroom. Now I'll take it over there, which he did, and read it this evening. Vigano goes on to explain, it is obvious that Bergoglio was only interested in knowing who the corrupt people were in order to be able to use, control, and blackmail them. Niccolini was among his proteges, a man who, as we have seen, he not only kept in his place, but promoted to higher positions, eliminating anyone who would oppose him, starting with Eugenio Hosler. I've often wondered, Vigano says, what happened to that white box and why the two cardinals, still alive, Herranz and De Giorgi, continue to remain silent in the face of the cover-up of what emerged from their investigation. So Vigano says there is a cover-up, there is a scandal, it is written down, it is in that white box, and why is it that the two cardinals who helped prepare it have remained quiet for all these years? Well, now we know why. If you come out and are critical of the Vatican or are critical of Francis, you get the Bishop Strickland treatment. You're removed from your see. Or in the case of Vigano, they issue and say, you've received a late sententia excommunication. Bye-bye. So that reveals sort of how the sausage is made in the Vatican.